we are in Daniel chapter 10, which, if you're looking at the little outline I've got there, means that we are entering into the final section of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel is 12 chapters long. It splits directly down the middle. 6 chapters are stories. 6 chapters are visions. There are visions in the story section, but the main difference between the first 6 chapters and the second 6 chapters is that all the visions in the first 6 chapters are given to somebody else, and Daniel will interpret them, whereas in the final 6 chapters, these are all visions which Daniel himself received, and then he will just basically just tell us what's going on. Chapters 2 through 7 are written in Aramaic, which leads us to believe that the audience of those books is not just the Jewish people, but also the broader Gentile world, specifically the Babylonian people. And then, whenever you look at chapter 1 and then chapters 8 through 12, those are the Hebrew chapters, which are primarily directed more towards the Jewish people in particular. Chapter 7 is kind of that bridge chapter. It is the first chapter in the vision section, but it's the last chapter in the Aramaic section, and so it kind of bridges the gap between those. And we talked a lot in that chapter about how that really is the central thrust of the book, because it basically just gives us this sweeping portrait of human history that culminates in the arrival of the Messianic kingdom at the end of all things. And then, most recently, we have had 2 more visions that Daniel has experienced. One in chapter 8, one in chapter 9. And I'm going to have you all recap those in a second. But going into this week, we are going to be in the final vision of Daniel, which is going to span this chapter, next week's chapter, and then also chapter 12. Next week, we might actually have to split the chapter into 2 different weeks because it's a pretty long chapter. But we'll just play that by ear whenever we get there. We might be able to cover it all in 1 week. But it does get very, very specific. And then chapter 12 is a very short chapter. It's only like 13 verses or something like that. And so we are almost at the end of the book of Daniel, and then we'll be going into Ezekiel, which will be fun. Yeah. Here is another way to view the structure of Daniel. There does seem to be a general chiastic structure to the entire book. Chiasm being that whole like A, B, C, C, B, A structure that you see up there. And in chapter 9, we got to the center of the chiasm with one of the coolest prophecies in the entire book of Daniel, where it's just really 3 verses in particular, but it's these verses about the 70 weeks, where we were actually having to do some math, and we were having to look at that, and it really is just one of the coolest things ever. I did talk to us last week about how just the things we talked about, take it with a grain of salt, because there are different ways to interpret it, but there does seem to be a general consensus amongst both Jewish and Christian scholars that the prophecy in Daniel 9 accurately predicts when the Messiah was supposed to arrive. Jewish people, obviously, they changed their interpretation of it a little bit, but we talked about that last week, and then today we're going to go to chapter 10. So real quick, can I get somebody to recap, or y'all can all just you don't have to do all of them. We can go back and forth. Daniel has had 3 visions so far. One in chapter 7, one in chapter 8, one in chapter 9. Let's go through and just briefly summarize each of those visions. What was the vision in chapter 7?
So the 4 beasts, first one was like a lion with wings of an eagle, which represented Babylon. Mm-hmm. And the 4 beasts are going to correlate to the 4 different empires that come and rule over essentially Jerusalem, or the Israelite people, so to speak. So the first one was like a lion with wings, and then second beast comes with 3 ribs in its mouth. This represents the Medes and the Persians. And then
it was like a lopsided bear.
It was a lopsided bear to represent that the Medes were not as powerful as the Persians, but they ruled in tandem.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at the text. Obviously, I'm going through this. Third beast was like a leopard, represents Alexander the Great and swift conquering of Eastern Asia down to, I believe, North Africa and most of Mesopotamia.
Yeah. And then what was the 4th beast?
And then the 4th beast, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't even describe what it was just a terrifying monstrosity that represented the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Well, we believe it's the Roman Empire, right? The 4th beast is the one where there's really a lot of confusion about, to where most people are pretty set that, okay, it's definitely like Babylon, Persia, Greece, and then there's a debate about the 4th one, and I think that might be intentional on the part of Daniel, to where the 4th one could represent multiple things throughout human history.
Like glory in the future.
Yes, yeah, and then you had like that little horn that was rising up, right? And
Speaking
and Daniel was like super terrified of that. But in the midst of all of that vision, what does he see?
he sees essentially Jesus come down and take care of
He doesn't know his name is Jesus, but he sees one like a son of man riding on the clouds to receive glory, honor, dominion from the Ancient of Days. And so you do have this promise that even though empires are rising and falling, God is in control. He's got a plan, and he is going to be the one who decides when empires rise, when they fall, and eventually the Messiah will reign. So that's the first vision. What is the vision in chapter 8? We don't need to go like super in detail, just brief summary.
Yeah, that's the ram and the goat.
Yeah.
And so that's just a ram and a goat. One represents Persia and one represents Greece, the kingdom and their kings. And the first is the ram. It goes through the whole focus is on just that these are beasts that no one is able to stop. And so this beast comes through, no one can stop it. And then out of nowhere, this goat rams into the ram, and it's like even more unstoppable. And
Yeah, and then from that goat, remember there was also a little horn that was rising up. And so you're getting this like recurring image of a horn rising up from these empires, but the goat does not, it's not parallel to the fourth beast in the previous vision, it's parallel to the third beast. And so now you've got a little horn rising from whatever the fourth empire was, and now you've got a little horn rising from the third empire, and you're almost getting the impression that every empire is going to come with one of these horn-like figures, right? Who kind of seems to represent just this almost like anti-Messiah figure, right? Like what we would call the Antichrist.
like if the Christ is like the shoot from the stump of Jesse.
Yes.
He's like the opposite of that.
Yeah, and so if the kingdom of God is always going to have a Messiah-like figure in charge of it, culminating in the capital M Messiah, well, these other kingdoms of the world are going to have anti-Messiahs who are constantly rising up. And we even see that in the book of Daniel, right? We have Nebuchadnezzar, we have Belshazzar. So there are these little m, or I guess little a, anti-messiahs or antichrists, but it's ultimately going to culminate in this final capital A antichrist, which then leads to the third vision, which, like I said, most of chapter 9 is just Daniel praying, and that's going to run parallel to today's chapter. So just so you know, today's chapter is going to partially include a vision, but today's chapter is mainly going to be introducing the bigger vision, which starts next week in chapter 11. And so chapter 9 directly corresponds to this week's chapter. But then at the very end of chapter 9, you have that third vision, and it's really not so much a vision as it is just the angel Gabriel announcing something.
Yeah,
And what does he
like a
announce?
message.
Yeah.
Basically, he says that there will be a time. He says there will be a time period where an announcement's going to get made. They're going to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Some time will pass, and then there will be a Messiah that will show up. Some time will pass. He'll be cut off, and the sacrifices will be cut off. And then after another bit of time, it ends with
There's this prince figure.
the prince figure, right? The abomination desolation thing.
Yeah, and so this prince figure would again seem to correspond to the little horn from the previous two visions.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is that we don't even have him associated with any particular
Yeah.
You'll notice that the prophecies going forward do not have the beast imagery that we saw in chapter 7 and 8. And so chapter 7 and 8, it seems like there is a corresponding parallel with chapters 9 and then 10, 11, and 12. But the beast imagery is gone, and now the imagery is going to be a little bit more straightforward and just kind of explaining things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in chapter 9, those verses, basically it says there's going to be 70 weeks appointed for, it says, to complete the transgression.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties into earlier in the chapter, Daniel's praying. He says, God, we haven't learned our lesson. We're still in sin. And so God says, okay, well, I had originally promised you 70 years of punishment. You haven't learned your lesson. And so, pulling from Leviticus, he says, your punishment's going to be sevenfold. So multiply 70 times 7. 490 years are appointed. And after that, I'm going to complete the transgression. He says there's going to be 7 weeks for rebuilding Jerusalem and the entire city and the temple and stuff. And then 62 more weeks of waiting until the Messiah arrives. And then the Messiah's going to be cut off. And then for an undisclosed amount of time, there's just going to be all sorts of wars and just, in general, just bad stuff going on. And it says that the temple's going to be destroyed. There's a lot of things that are going to happen during this time period, but it doesn't specify how long passes. To where you don't know if, like the 70th week directly follows the end of the 69th week, or if there's a huge span in between. But it does say that eventually there's going to be this prince figure who arises. He'll put an end to sacrifices, which would seem to imply that there is some sort of span, because it said the temple was already destroyed. And if the temple was destroyed, then obviously there wouldn't be sacrifices already. And so it seems to suggest there's another temple, the sacrifices are cut off, and then this guy's going to make a covenant for 1 week, so the 70th week, but halfway through it, he's going to break the covenant. And it seems like this would be pointing towards some ultimate capital A anti-Messiah figure. And so that's kind of where we left off, which leads us into chapter 10 today. And one thing I want you to notice right off the bat is that there does seem to be the parallel with like how this vision is going to start seems to parallel with chapter 8's vision, whereas chapter 9 and chapter 7 seem to kind of parallel with one another a little bit. Do you remember where Daniel was at whenever he saw the vision in chapter 7?
Going to 7.
Yes, chapter 7.
Range of sheets.
He kept repeating a phrase. I saw...
He was in great, came up out of the sea,
No, that's what he's seeing, but where is he at?
lying in bed.
He was laying in bed, right? So he's at home, laying in bed. That's in chapter 7. Chapter 8, where is he at when he has the vision?
That's when he's in Persia, huh?
Yeah, remember he finds himself almost transported in the vision to where he is standing in Susa, like at the citadel of Susa and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's whenever he's basically on the edge of a body of water, right? What canal was it? It was the Ulai Canal,
Yeah.
right? And so that's where he finds himself there. Okay, chapter 9, where's he at? Whenever he starts praying.
He was fasting. He was in sackcloth and ashes.
Presumably, where's he at when he's doing all this? If he's fasting in sackcloth and ashes and he's praying,
Would assume he'd be in his house.
he's probably at his house, right?
Yeah.
Since we know that's where Daniel regularly prayed from earlier in the book. Okay, well, in this week's chapter, he's going to find himself again on the edge of a river. And so, chapter 7 and chapter 9, he's at his home when he has these angelic encounters and stuff like that. Chapters 8 and then chapter 10, they both begin with him on the edge of a river. I don't know what to do with that information. I just want to highlight that there's that parallel.
Was 9 when he was on his balcony?
Does it say where he's at directly? I think it says he's looking towards Jerusalem or whatever. I don't know if it specifically said where he was. It just says in the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, I discerned in the books the number of the years. So he was studying the book of Jeremiah.
Oh, okay.
And he says, I gave my face to the Lord God to seek him by prayer. So I don't think it says directly where he's at. I'm looking if later on he does. No, I don't think it says directly where he's at, but I think the implication that he's at his house.
Gotcha.
And so this leads to chapter 10. Sean, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have us read through the entire thing. It's 21 verses long.
Okay.
And then we'll go back, just so that we have a full grasp of the whole chapter.
Easier
We'll
to
go back.
talk through, yeah.
Yeah.
In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and one of great conflict. But he understood the word, and had an understanding of what had appeared. In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I did not eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all, until the entire 3 weeks were fulfilled. And on the 24th day of the 1st month, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is, the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose loins were girded with a belt of pure fine gold of Uphaz. His body was also like beryl, his face had the appearance of lightning, his eyes were like flaming torches, his arms and feet like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. Now I, Daniel, alone saw the vision that appeared, but the men who were with me did not see the vision that appeared. Nevertheless, a great terror fell on them, and they ran away to hide themselves. So I alone remained, and saw this great vision that appeared. Yet no might remained in me, for my outward splendor turned to a deathly pallor, and I retained no might. But I heard the sound of his words, and as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Then behold, a hand touched me and set me shaking on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I am about to speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Then he said to me, Do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you gave your heart to understand this, and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. But the prince of this kingdom of Persia was standing against me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the great chief princes, came to help me. Now I had been left there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the last days, for the vision pertains to the days yet future. Now when he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. And behold, one in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke and said to him who was standing before me, O my Lord, as a result of the vision that appeared, pains have come upon me, and I have retained no might. Now how can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? As for me, right now no might stands within me, nor does any breath remain within me. Then this one with the appearance of a man touched me again and strengthened me. And he said, O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Gather strength and be strong. Now as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength and said, May my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Then he said, Do you know why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Now there is no one who exerts strength with me against these forces except Michael your prince.
All right.
Interesting.
So, I'm going to be honest with you. This chapter and the next few chapters, they just get weird. I mean, really, all of Daniel's visions, they're some of the weirdest just sections to me in the entire Bible, to where I feel like a lot of it is just going to be a little bit more speculative. Just not speculative in like a dangerous sense, but in the regards like there's much debate about this, right? There's not there's certain passages of scripture where pretty much everybody interprets it the same way. Whereas when you get to Daniel, the back half of Daniel in particular, there's just a lot of debate.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a lot of stuff here where we're just going to hold our interpretations with an open hand, and we're just going to kind of explore what the text says. So in general, what happens here?
So he's sitting on the Great Banks, and then a godlike man appears before him and essentially scares off all the other men around him, even though the men can't see this man. And then he puts Daniel to sleep. And then Daniel wakes up, and essentially, I believe we can assume this is Jesus was talking to him, and he says again.
Well, it doesn't say Jesus at all.
It doesn't. But okay.
Yeah. I mean, basically, just the guy shows up and tells him that he's going to tell him what's going to happen in the last days.
Yeah.
And Daniel's speechless and
He's freaked
weak.
out.
Yeah. One question that I have reading this entire chapter is how many people Daniel is seeing in this vision.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're reading through it, it starts off at the very beginning, and Daniel, he sees this guy apparently standing like above the river or something like that. And if you've read the book of Revelation, the description that he gives of this guy, it's basically word for word what John puts in Revelation. So John is very clearly drawing from Revelation whenever he describes. I mean, John is clearly pulling from Daniel whenever he describes Jesus in Revelation.
Yeah.
The question becomes, are they seeing the same person, or is it just dressed in similar clothes? That's something we're going to have to wrestle through. And then as a result of this, Daniel falls on the ground. And then if you go to the next passage, it says that a hand touched me and set me shaking on my hands and knees, and he said to me. And so all of a sudden, a guy begins to speak to Daniel in verses 10 through 15. But the question becomes, is the guy speaking to Daniel the same person that Daniel just saw? Right? Because it doesn't say, and his hand touched me.
Yeah.
It said, a hand touched me. And then whoever it is who touched Daniel is the one who now talks to him. You know what I mean? And so that becomes interesting to me. And then he falls down again. And then it says, verse 16, one in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. Which seems to me that would be, okay, is the one in the likeness of the sons of men, is that the same person who was just talking to Daniel? Or is it the same person who Daniel saw at the very beginning? Or is this an altogether different person?
Yeah.
And so the question is, are we dealing with like one person that Daniel's seeing, two people, or three people? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if the text gives a clear answer. And from what I've seen, people do interpret it differently. And so it just becomes like, well, especially also then you have the added question about Michael showing up in here, right? It mentions Michael, one of the chief princes, and it mentions him twice in the chapter. And the question becomes, is any of these figures Michael? Right? Like, is Daniel seeing Michael at all, or is Michael just randomly being mentioned? Because keep in mind, this is the first time Michael the Archangel has ever been mentioned, and it is the only time he is ever mentioned in the Bible. Right? He's mentioned in this chapter, well, in the Old Testament at least. He's mentioned in Daniel chapter 10 twice, and then he's going to be mentioned once in the first verse of chapter 12. And that is the only time Michael is ever mentioned in the Old Testament. He's mentioned a bunch in the intertestamental time period between the Old and New Testaments, and then he shows up a few times in the New Testament. And so the question becomes, okay, this Michael guy is mentioned, but why? And to me, the best explanation would be that he is one of the people who shows up here, and that would suggest, okay, well maybe the person in verses 10 through 15 is a separate person, and he's explaining that maybe the person that Daniel saw was Michael. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Okay. And then as to regards to what like Michael's doing here, maybe he's like one of the smaller quote-unquote Elohim that's put in charge of taking care of Persia, so to speak.
Well, so at the very least, we can say that he's not in charge of Persia. It seems like Michael's described as the person in charge of Israel, because it says that Michael is in combat with the so-called Prince of Persia. And the Prince of Persia, it doesn't seem to be talking about a human prince. It seems to be talking about a divine prince, in which case we would suggest that would be, according to the whole divine council worldview, that would be probably an Elohim that God placed in charge of Persia. But then it says that Michael is in charge of, like, where is that? I think it's in the next slide, where he specifically says, where does it say Michael, your prince?
Well,
Right,
very last
very end.
phrase. Like the
That's like the last phrase. Now there is no one who exerts strength with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. And so that would seem to suggest that he is not the prince of Persia, because keep in mind Daniel is in Persia at the time. Instead, it seems like he's saying that he is your prince in the sense of the prince of your people, right? The Jewish people.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of interesting questions that we've got to wrestle through
And
here.
they seem to be never mind. I'm just kidding.
Yes. And so we'll have to walk through it and talk about it, and I've got some interesting stuff that we're going to wrestle through. I got to talk to Sean about it earlier today, but I'll save that for probably the end of the discussion. So let's walk through it. And we're going to have interesting stuff to talk about from the very get-go. In the 3rd year of Cyrus king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true and one of great conflict, but he understood the word and had an understanding of what had appeared. Alright, so what do we read right off the bat?
So Cyrus, king of Persia. This is the first king of Persia, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's like the predominant king of
Predominant.
Persia,
Yeah. So predominant king, and if you go through Ezra and Nehemiah, from what I understand, he is responsible for giving the order to send the Israelites going back to start rebuilding the temple and the walls.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
he gives the first decree to go do that.
Yeah, he is the one Gentile king who is described as an anointed one of God, right? A Mashiach. So he is a Gentile Messiah, which is kind of cool. But it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, which brings us to our first issue today, because if you go to the Daniel chapter 1, which we've already covered in this group, it starts off in the first verse, and it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Right? So that's when the book of Daniel starts. And then, if you go to the end of chapter 1, it says that Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. Which seems to suggest that Daniel continued his prophetic ministry until the first year of Cyrus the king.
Interesting.
But now this says this happened in the third year of Cyrus the king. What do y'all make of that? Some people would say this is an outright contradiction, but I'll ask y'all to try to work through this. I don't have a firm answer, but let's consider what is the context of chapter 1 in Daniel. Do you remember how did the book start off?
Israel was conquered.
And that was in the opening verse.
Yes.
But what is the chapter about? How does Daniel chapter 1 open up? What is the main conflict that's going on there?
It's the main conflict. It sets up the stage to where you will have people like Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They'll draw the line at certain spots to serve God, right? For example, later on we saw the refusal to eat choice food by Daniel.
So that's in chapter 1.
That's in chapter 1.
But what was the issue there? Why was that such a big problem? Like, what were they specifically appointed in Babylon to do?
They were appointed to be leaders of the Israelite people, and then they were trained in the Babylonian ways to be leaders of the Israelite people because they thought, well, the Israelite people are going to be more reluctant, more rebellious to accept a foreign ruler or someone over them, so we'll just train up people of their own bloodline and put them over them.
Yeah, and so they were going to be leaders in the Babylonian, like
advisors.
Yes.
they're going to be advisors, right? And so I think that maybe what's going on at the end of Daniel chapter 1 is it's not saying that is when Daniel's prophetic ministry ended. It might simply be saying that Daniel continued in his role as an advisor and a prominent person in Babylon until the first year of Cyrus the king. You know what I mean? So basically, through the end of the Babylonian Empire.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Which makes sense, right?
I feel like that might be a way to reconcile that. So it's not saying Daniel died or something that year. It's simply saying he was an advisor in Babylon all the way until it fell, right? Mm-hmm. And then he also became prominent.
And then it also begged the question:
Cyrus.
Was he ever an advisor to Cyrus, so to speak? Because it seems like if when you're a new king, right, you want to potentially boot out or get rid of most of or all of the former advisors.
Well, we did talk about this because they actually did the reverse of that. Remember, we talked about this, how they actually wanted to keep a lot of them because if you just conquered an empire, the last thing you want to do is shake things up too much, or else people will rebel.
Yes. And
so if you remember, that was the whole lion's den story. Is that whenever the Medes and the Persians took over, Daniel was still in a place of prominence, and he was one of the satraps and stuff over everything. And so I don't know if that is the way to solve that problem. I don't know if that's what other people have proposed. Is that what you're looking up, Sean?
Well, yeah, I was looking at the verse. It just says that they continued in service before the king. And that's right. Every matter of wisdom and understanding, he found them 10 times better. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king.
Yeah. So to me, it seems like it's just saying he continued in service to the king.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't really, nothing in here really speaks to me about him being his ministry.
Yeah.
It says more about being in service with the king. That's what the whole chapter's about.
Yeah. The main reason I wanted to highlight it is because I've seen other people suggest it's a contradiction, whereas I think they're maybe reading something into the text which isn't actually being communicated. Whereas I think that maybe chapter 1 is specifically talking about his role as a Babylonian advisor. Whereas obviously once Babylon's gone, his role changes, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say it's not a necessary contradiction. I mean...
Yeah. And because, he'd be probably in ministry until he dies. So unless it says he dies...
Yeah.
Maybe if it said he died the first year, that'd be different.
Yeah. And so, in the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And so he still keeps the same Babylonian name. And the word was true and one of great conflict. So this is really just setting up what's going to come, right? We're going to see the great war unfold. But he understood the word and had an understanding of what had appeared. So right off the bat, what does that tell us that's different from some of the previous things that we've seen?
other ones he's had to have them explained to him by someone.
Yeah. Basically, Gabriel has to show up and say, like, hey, let me explain to you what's going on. And Daniel's like, I don't get it still. Whereas here, it seems like there is still going to be angels like explaining stuff to him, but more or less he does seem to grasp. Like, they're going to be a little bit more straightforward. And it probably seems more straightforward to him because it's in light of previous visions he's already seen. Like, he understands the context.
That's fair.
In those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I did not eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were fulfilled. This begs the question, why do you think Daniel was mourning?
I assume because of his previous dreams still leaving him all shooken.
What's that?
I'm gonna assume because of his previous dreams still having him kind of shooken up.
So that could be possible, other than the fact that the previous dream took place several years earlier.
Oh, okay.
So the last one was in the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, which seems to correspond to Cyrus, king of Persia, like around the same time period, because Darius was a Mede and Cyrus is Persian. Those both seem to be around 538 BC. So we're now dealing with 3 years later. So we're dealing with like 536, 535 BC. But he's only been mourning for 3 weeks. So it doesn't seem to be derived from the previous vision. Do we know anything of what could have happened, like, in Jewish history that might inspire him to mourn?
Like a specific event at that, like, in that exact time period?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure. I was gonna ask if it had to do with, like, how it mentions the 24th day of the first month, that there was like a holiday, but you mean like not that?
So, I mean, there could be something that corresponds to that. Assuming that the first month referenced here is the month of Nisan, then this would be around Passover time. In which case, the Passover begins on like the 14th of Nisan, I believe it is. And so, like, if this is the 24th day of the month, that means that he started like mourning 3 weeks earlier, so that'd be like the 3rd day of Nisan, which is actually, let me check real quick what day the Day of Atonement is, or actually no, it wouldn't be then. Day of Atonement's at a different time, it's in like October or whatever.
Oh.
But I think that there might be reason to believe, and you're just having to guess here, right? We don't know, it doesn't explicitly tell us, but we do know that Cyrus, during the first year of his reign, he is the one who gave the order for the people to go down and rebuild the temple. However, if you go read Ezra and Nehemiah and stuff, you'll realize that, or even also if you read like Haggai and Malachi and Zechariah and stuff, they didn't really get the job done very quickly. To where they started working on stuff, but there ended up being some conflict that resulted in the job basically just being indefinitely postponed until decades and decades and decades later, whenever all of a sudden, like, the prophets start showing up and they say, guys, get to work. Like, y'all build houses for yourselves, yet God's house is still lying in ruins. And so it could be possible that maybe Daniel has received word that, like, because if you go to the previous chapter, you know, he's all like, he's lamenting Jerusalem. And he's like, God, I want to rebuild the city and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
it could be that maybe he's just heard news that the building project that was announced has been kind of postponed. You know, and so, like, it isn't living up to what he was expecting.
Yeah, that makes sense, because this is the 3rd year. I guess, for some reason in my head, I was still thinking this was the 1st year, and so I was thinking, like, that's almost too short of a time, but yeah, after, like, 2 years, yeah, if he's heard word that nothing's really been done, then...
Yeah, so, like, it allows time for a big group of people to move down there, to start getting to work, for it to get cut off, and it to be pushed off long enough to where word gets back to him. And given how much, like literally chapter 9, he's saying, God, like, when are you going to, like, send us back? When are you going to rebuild things? When are you going to, like, shower us with your favor? And then God even says the temple will be rebuilt. But then, keep in mind, he says the temple's going to be destroyed and stuff again, but the timetable at the end of Daniel chapter 9 doesn't even begin until the order to rebuild the entire city happens. And so you can almost see, like, a hypothetical reality where Daniel was hoping that that first order by Cyrus was the beginning of the ticking time clock, you know? But then he receives news that they're not even rebuilding it, and so he realizes,
longer.
Oh, it's even like it's not even just 490 years. It's 490 years from the moment that they actually start rebuilding. You know, and so it's like you can see how that would make him mourn, and so that could be it. I don't know. That's my best guess. And so he's mourning for 3 entire weeks. He did not eat any tasty food, so he's not. It doesn't seem like he's fasting entirely, but he's fasting from like choice foods that would have been his as like a satrap and a high government official. So he's denying himself the fancier foods. He did not eat meat or wine or he didn't let wine enter the mouth, which also lets us know that I guess he did eventually start eating meat. So it seems like maybe there was like I don't really know how to explain that. Because remember in chapter 1, he was all against eating meat whatsoever. But maybe he has like developed a way where, I don't know.
Maybe it's changed with Persia.
Yeah, like maybe he, like under Persia, he's more fine with it because maybe they're not sacrificing it to pagan gods or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But at this time, he's not eating meat or wine. He's not letting any enter his mouth, nor did he use any ointment at all until the entire 3 weeks were fulfilled. So basically, just 3 weeks of constant mourning. And on the 24th day of the first month, while I was by the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose loins were girded with a belt of pure fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches, his arms and feet like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. Alright, so what do we see there?
An incredibly majestic figure.
An incredibly majestic
As we
figure.
discussed earlier, this is how John describes Jesus in Revelation.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that in a second because I do want to address that. But before we jump straight to Revelation, let's understand it in its context. Or let's understand like what Daniel's seeing and try to explain it. What exactly does he see?
Someone with another worldly appearance for sure.
Yeah, this evidently isn't just a normal man, right?
Yeah, especially the sound like a sound of a multitude. Like humans can't talk like that.
Yeah. Whenever he talks, it's like thunderous.
It's a booming voice.
Yes. Okay.
It blocks out all other sounds.
Yeah. So paint the picture for me, and as you're describing the guy, explain to me what you might associate the different garments and stuff with. What's the first thing we see about the person?
A belt of pure fine gold of Uphaz.
Even before that.
Oh,
Dressed in
linen.
linen.
He's dressed in linen. Okay, you think dressed in linen, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Maybe the linen garments that the priests.
Yeah.
wear.
I would think something like priestly. And if not a priest, I would jump more towards like angelic figures, because a lot of times angelic figures throughout scripture are described as being dressed in white. Right? And so...
Was linen always white?
Usually, that's usually how I interpret it here. Linen doesn't have to be white, but usually... I don't know, for some reason in my head, whenever they describe it as linen, like, I think in other places, like, linen's, like, because whenever I think of linen, I think of, like, the Egyptians and stuff.
Yeah.
And I know they would typically wear white, and so...
And usually when they do describe another worldly figure wearing anything, it's usually
Yeah.
white.
Yeah. And so I would associate this with kind of either the priests or some sort of angelic figure. And at the very least, we can say it is... This is not just a Levite priest, right? It is at the very least a higher figure. And his loins are girded with a belt of pure fine gold of Uphaz.
And I wanted to discuss where is Uphaz.
That's a great question.
And what I want to know is how would he know that's where the gold came from?
Or like, well, I don't think he's saying the gold came from there. I think he's saying it's like it, which is to give it high praise or compliment.
24 karat gold.
24.
Essentially, just know that that's like very, very fine.
Oh, it's so shiny you can see your reflection in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a very fine grade of gold.
Yeah.
Probably highly valuable as well.
Yeah, so the word Uphaz, it only shows up in one other place, and it's also associated with gold. It's in Jeremiah. It talks about beaten silver brought from Tarshish and gold from Uphaz. So it's just it's just a place that's associated with amazing gold. The word Uphaz literally means desire of fine gold.
Oh,
So-
wow. Well,
Okay.
Alright.
Yeah. And
Notorious
that's
for high quality.
it's the goldest gold you will ever see.
yeah, the goldiest gold you've ever seen. Yeah, and so what do you think this is? Like, what is the significance of the gold in the belt?
I guess purity.
Purity, but also just, I think, royalty,
Yeah.
right? I mean, typically you don't go around with a gold belt. I mean, nowadays, I guess you see people, like, you know, whenever you, like, make a costume, you have a gold belt on or something like that. But yeah, like, but this is, like, you know, usually gold is reserved for, like, the finest of things. You don't just, like, make it, like, hold your pants up or something.
Yeah.
And so he's got it wrapped around his chest, right? Or maybe even lower down. His body also was like beryl. What is beryl?
I'm trying to remember
It's
what
a glowstone.
Yeah.
Beryl. I don't remember what color that is.
What is that?
Yeah.
I keep jumping to the
I think-
hurricane.
I
But
think it could be different colors. I think it's usually green.
Well, I think that's
I think
probably
it's
more
green.
like the refined beryl. I'm assuming that he's not saying the guy is green.
Yeah. Oh,
Like-
yeah. I don't think so either. Yeah.
Like, I'm assuming that the rougher version of beryl or something like that is a different color.
Maybe it's just emphasizing.
I don't know.
He has like gleaming like gemstones.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's just like describing like roughness or something like that. I don't really know what to do with that.
Mhm.
Let me look what the word is. Oh, that's fun. The word for beryl is Tarshish. That's kind of fun.
That's fun.
But they said like perhaps like it could be like perhaps like chrysolite, yellow jasper, or some sort of yellow colored stone. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind is that like the words that we translate for like very specific terms in Hebrew, like
onyx or jasper.
yeah, like they're not going to be directly the same because sometimes it's hard for us to figure out exactly what stone they had in mind.
Yeah.
But at the very least, I think it's the idea of he's probably like gleaming in
I
some way.
was in like gleaming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that seems to be
gemstones
like-
might gleam.
Yeah, that seems to be like the consistent thing with the description. He is very bright.
Yeah. His face had the appearance of lightning. What does that bring to mind?
Probably just illuminating very brightly.
Well, it's like shining, right? It brings to mind like me, like Moses with his face glowing. But that's just how this guy's face is. His eyes are like flaming torches.
oh, geez, sorry.
Literally.
So is he like Cyclops, like just shooting
Yeah.
lasers out of his eyes?
Nah.
That's kind of how we picture
Jake,
it. But
well, if you don't behave yourself.
But I think the idea is just like the like it's almost like light is coming from his eyes in
Mhm.
a way. But what do you think? What's the significance of that? Is he just doing a physical description, or what does that suggest about the person? Like what is the general feeling you're getting about this person?
I'm like
Yeah.
holy, set apart.
Honestly,
Like his eyes are probably so bright you can't even look at him straight in the eye.
yeah. Honestly, when I hear like flaming eyes, I usually think of like anger.
Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
yes, anger.
That or also I associate like, at least in the Bible, like I go back to like even like Genesis, like with like the flaming sword,
Mhm.
like the seraphim and stuff.
I'm with Sean
Or
there.
the cherubim.
For some reason, I just imagine his eyes with like white fire coming out of them, and like looking at Daniel very fiercely in anger.
And
Well, so I don't know if he's angry at Daniel, but I think the
Yeah.
imagery is a fierceness, right?
Mhm.
He's an intimidating figure, and I think even the eyes being a flame of fire is there's like this piercing element to it, to where
Mhm.
it's like this guy he sees things more than a normal human sees. You know, like he
Mhm.
like I don't know if that kind of makes sense,
I
but
can see it.
and then his arms and feet are like a gleam of burnished bronze, so it's like strong and again probably like reflective. And the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. So you just got the idea that this guy is a very intimidating figure, and most people would interpret this to be just a random angel.
Mhm.
But I do run into an issue with that, mainly because it actually just so happens that so you know I'm reading through Revelation in my own time, like that's like my reading I'm doing every day, and it literally happens that the passage that that this is about it's the verse I started today in Revelation. It's in
Nice.
Revelation chapter 1, verse 12 and 13. So I started verse 13 today. And in Revelation, John is on Patmos. He hears a voice speaking behind him. He turns around and he sees somebody who he clearly identifies as Jesus. And it says, I saw one like a son of man, clothed in a robe reaching to the feet, and girded across his chest with a golden sash. And his head and his hair were white like wool, like snow. And his eyes were like a flame of fire. And his feet were like burnished bronze. when it had been made to glow in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. And having in his right hand 7 stars, and a sharp 2-edged sword which comes out of his mouth, and his face was like the sun shining in its power. So you see that John adds several details, but it is very clear, abundantly clear, that when John writes this, he has Daniel in mind.
Yeah.
And so he is either saying that Jesus is like the guy Daniel saw, but it seems more likely to me that he is identifying Jesus with the person that Daniel saw. Just because whenever you look elsewhere in the book of Revelation, that seems to be how John talks about things. Like, so earlier in the book, or even in that passage I just read, he says, I saw one like a son of man. Well, he's referencing the book of Daniel, right? Daniel chapter 7, I saw one like a son of man riding on the clouds. A few verses earlier, John does the same thing. He says, Jesus is riding on the clouds. And he isn't saying that Jesus is comparable to the person Daniel saw in Daniel chapter 7. He's saying that Jesus is that guy. And so it is possible that John is simply saying that whenever he turned and saw Jesus, he saw somebody who looked a lot like the guy that Daniel saw. But it seems to me like he would more explicitly say that. Yeah. Like he would say, I saw a guy whose description was like that mentioned in the prophet Daniel, and then he gives his description. But instead, he says, I saw this guy, and he describes him in the same way Daniel describes this guy. But then, what's interesting in Revelation is that he mixes in qualities that Daniel attributed to the Ancient of Days back in Daniel chapter 7. And so it almost seems like whenever Daniel sees Jesus, he's blending together the Ancient of Days, who is God, with the one like a son of man, who approaches the Ancient of Days, and with this figure that Daniel sees here. Which would lead me to believe that who Daniel is seeing is Jesus himself. I don't know. Right? Like again, this is where you have to arrive at different interpretations, because if you look at most commentaries, they will say this is just another angel, but he looks a lot like what John saw. Whereas to me, I don't know. To me, it seems like John is like, if you look at how the rest of Revelation works, John is not just introducing new concepts; he is reinterpreting old context to provide revelation and understanding. Right? He's trying to unveil things. And so it seems to me that John is, like, whenever he describes Jesus in a way that directly corresponds to this, he's trying to tell the reader, like he's interpreting this passage for us. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. And so I hold it with an open hand, and like just take it with a grain of salt. But that is kind of where I'm leaning here, to where the person that Daniel is seeing here is Jesus himself. But then the question becomes, why? Right? Like, he's just like over the Tigris River. I don't have an answer for that. Right? But it seems like that's what's going on here. Do y'all have any thoughts about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. And so, yeah, that's my kind of conclusion there.
I would agree with you on that. It does seem to be hinting at that, especially when you take into account what John writes. Yeah. However, it's impossible to be certain. Yeah, and so just reading Daniel by itself, we just say, okay, there's just a really powerful person who's standing in front of Daniel. And so that's the one thing I want to do. I want to try to interpret this just in Daniel's context. But as New Testament Christians, we do have the benefit of like later revelation to help guide us.
Had any angels ever been described in a similar way before?
Not like this. No.
Okay.
But this is the first time we've seen this direct. Like,
and that would further support that.
Yeah. So it's like, that's why I'm saying, when you read Revelation, it is very clear that he has this vision in mind. The question just becomes, is he describing somebody like this person, or is he describing this person? Like, that's really the question, because it's undeniable that he's referencing this passage. And so, I don't know. But, yeah, so as we go forward, we're going to try to interpret it through both lenses. My goal is, first off, like, to try to interpret it just in Daniel's context. But at the end of our discussion, we'll talk about the Jesus thing again, right? So going forward, let's forget that we mentioned Revelation at all. Let's read this as if Revelation did not exist. But then at the end of our discussion, we'll revisit it and try to arrive at some conclusions. And so, Daniel sees this amazing figure over the Tigris River, or just, I guess, in front of it, or somewhere near the river. And it says, now I, Daniel, alone saw the vision that appeared. But the men who were with me did not see the vision that appeared, Nevertheless, a great terror fell on them, and they ran away to hide themselves. Okay, so what happens there?
They knew something. Oh, was out of place though. They couldn't see what was happening.
Yeah, maybe they saw lightning or just storming.
They sensed a disturbance. In the
Yeah,
force.
they sense some numinous presence.
Yeah, which to be fair, I kind of also associate with like the presence of God,
Mm.
like both in Old and New Testament. Like Sinai, you have like fire descending and people are trembling. Saul, you have a flash of light and
Yeah.
no one else
Yeah,
can like see or hear, but they're afraid.
I was about to reference that. Reminds me a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, that's why I find it so interesting, because the story that as Christians we immediately jump to whenever we hear this is we think of Saul on the road to Damascus, whenever a person appears to him and he sees the person but nobody else does, but everybody else hears something. And in that instance, who is it who appeared?
Jesus.
It was Jesus. And so, like, that's where it's like it kind of leads me to like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's too similar to other
Yeah.
parts in the Bible.
yeah,
I guess the transfiguration. It's not like that everyone's there and like no one sees it. I guess it's just like that he takes them off to the side.
yes.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there are similar instances to where, if you look in the Gospels with at the baptism of Jesus, it says that Jesus and John the Baptist saw a dove descending from heaven after the baptism, and they heard a voice. But it doesn't seem like anybody else did. Some of them might have heard the voice, but some of them thought it was thunder.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like speaking of the thunder thing, that's like right before he gets arrested.
Yeah,
Right.
in John chapter 12, I think it is, whenever the Greeks come to inquire about Jesus, and he says, the hour is at hand. And then God speaks from heaven and says, this is my son. Or no, God said, or Jesus says, glorify your name. And God says, I have glorified it and I will glorify it again. But then a bunch of people think, was that thunder? Or, I don't know. But so, what I'm saying is that pretty much every instance I can think of, there might be other ones. But whenever you have things like this happening, it seems to be consistently associated with Jesus. Right? Either at his baptism or whenever he announces his impending doom, or whenever he appears to Saul, it all seems to be about him. But I don't know. And again, that's reading the New Testament into this. For right now, we're just trying to understand this. But at the very least, we can say that Daniel, he sees this guy, he is terrified, and he's going to fall to the ground, which is also similar to how John reacts whenever he sees Jesus. But
Yeah.
putting that to the side, nobody else sees this, right? They're like, they feel something. We don't know if they saw something at all, or if they just felt like a terror fall, like just like some dread fell upon them to where they can tell something happened, and they ran away to hide. Like, so, whether they saw something or not, they just skedaddle. They get out of there. So I alone remained, and saw this great vision that appeared. Yet no might remained in me, for my outward splendor turned to deathly pallor, and I retained no might. So Daniel doesn't flee away, but what does he do?
He's paralyzed with fear.
He turns white.
Yeah, he just turns white. He just so if there's like fight or flight, Daniel's freeze, right? You know, like he doesn't fight, he doesn't run away, he just freezes.
He got sensory overload.
Yeah, and he's just like, okay, to where you do get the impression that what he's seeing right here is unlike anything he's seen before. And keep in mind, this is a dude who regularly just talks with Gabriel, right?
Yeah.
Him and Gabriel, like he has Gabriel on speed dial. Yet he sees this, and he's terrified. But I heard the sound of his words. And as soon as I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Okay, so what happens there?
He hears him and falls asleep.
He hears him and falls asleep.
Which
How
even like the deep sleep, that's just like associated with like Abraham and Adam. Just,
Yeah, I was looking to see if it's the same word. It's not the same word as the same word from like Adam and Abraham and stuff like that. This one, I'm trying to figure out why they translated it as like deep sleep. I mean, I guess that is how it's translated, but
what does it mean more like
yeah, I mean, it just seems like to be fast asleep. Like it is a heavy sleep, but it's different than the deep sleep that you see with Adam and Abraham.
oh okay.
But I do, that is the imagery that comes to mind. But in those instances, who is it who puts them to sleep?
God.
right? So it's like that's where it's like the text is leading me to think.
Okay, now we got 3 cubes.
Yes, like the text is leading me to think that this is more than simply just your regular run-of-the-mill angel, right? And also you'll notice that we don't know what the man said, right? It just says that Daniel heard what the guy said, and as soon as he heard the words, he fell into a deep sleep on his face with his face to the ground.
It's too majestic for any mortal to know yet.
Yeah. But we're not told yet what exactly the man says. Daniel just falls asleep, face to the ground. It makes me wonder if he's falling asleep here, or if this is his way of describing like fainting, right? Because it says as soon as he heard it, he fell into a deep sleep on my face with my face to the ground. To me, that seems like he like fell over, you know, and he's like it's like he fainted, unless he just like. You just imagine like shrinking down to his knees and just like falling over, passed out. I mean, I guess that's the same as fainting, but so, something happens to where he does literally have sensory overload and falls asleep. Or you could, I guess, suggest that the person put him to sleep. I don't know. Verse 10. Then behold, a hand touched me and set me shaking on my hands and my knees. Okay, so what happens now?
So a hand touches him, and right now we can presume that this is a different person.
We don't
know because it doesn't say like, and then he touched me. It's just a hand.
Yeah, and so we just know that we don't know how much time passes. We don't know how long he's asleep. We just know at some point a hand touched him instead of shaking on his hands and his knees.
And then it could be possible he's like still physically asleep and now it's just in some sort of vision state.
I don't know. I hadn't considered that. I think that the idea is that he's awake now. I'm trying to think of
Is this whole scenario a vision, or did I forget a detail?
So, well, he's awake. He just like so. A vision doesn't necessarily have to be like him being asleep. So, like there'd be like so. Back in chapter 7, he said that he was having a night vision, like while he was in his bed dreaming, right? Whereas this one, he seems to have been awake whenever he had the vision, right? So, he's literally just like fasting over by the edge of this river, and he sees this thing.
Yeah.
And so the vision has begun, but then he falls asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hand touches him, sets him up, but it doesn't set him up all the way. He's just almost like in like he's on all fours, right?
Yeah.
He's on his hands, he's on his knees, and then eventually we're going to see that the person tells him to get all the way up and stand upright. And so, again, there's so much that I just don't know the answers to here. To where you have Daniel, he's in a prostrate position, just like totally face on the ground, and then he gets up on all fours, and he's going to stand upright. And whenever you hear that threefold position, what comes to y'all's mind? Like there's something that comes to my mind biblically, but I want to know if that's what y'all think of. Like you think of somebody laying down, and then somebody on all fours, and then you have somebody standing upright.
Like laying down on their stomach or back, or
Well, he's laying down on his face, so I'm assuming his stomach.
Are you talking
so
about
stomach, all fours, and then somebody.
Like the imagery of that. What does that remind you of?
Are you talking about the common reaction when people see an angel?
Not necessarily. Even though I mean that is what literally happens. To me, the imagery of that almost reflects like if you go back to creation, the type of things that God created, like specifically the land animals.
Yeah.
You know, you've got it talks about the creeping things that crawl on the ground. Then you have the beast of the field, and then you have man. Right?
Mhm.
Like all the things that God made on like day 6. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if that's what's going on here. But you have the imagery of him laying on his belly like a creeping thing. And then he's on his hands and his knees like a beast. And then he's told to stand upright. And he's going to be standing upright whenever he receives the message. I don't know. Like again, I've got theories for this stuff, but I don't know why it says that, right? I can describe what and what it makes me think of, but I don't really go where to go beyond that.
He evolved.
Like Daniel says, I understand this message, and I'm like, I wish that Daniel was in this Bible study group. I wish that he could just tell us the answers.
Right.
And he said to me, "O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I am about to speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you." So again, we do not know if this is the same person. And I don't know, like I genuinely just don't know, like there's nothing in the text that really would tell us, but it seems to me that it was the appearance of the other person that made him fall over.
Mhm.
Whereas he seems to interact with this person a little bit more normally, even though the person will say, "Do not be afraid," right? And so I don't know if we're like, what do y'all think? Is it suggesting that this is the same person or a separate person? The main reason this is going to be relevant is because there's certain things that he says in here that are going to shape things we're going to bring up at the end. But do y'all think this is talking about the same person? Like, is it the same person waking him up, or is this a different person?
Well, if
I'm
we
leaning towards other person.
Me
personally.
too.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say if we assume that the other figure was Jesus, then it wouldn't make any sense to say that he has been sent to him, because God's the one who sends people. So that would imply to me that this is an angel.
Well, but again, we're trying to not think of the Jesus element to this because we don't have a firm conclusion there. We're just trying to interpret it in the light of what this is. And even if it was Jesus, we can't say that God doesn't send him, because the most famous Bible verse is God so loved the world that he sent his son.
In the previous in the previous section, it never had like the figure like interact with him, right? It just said that he
just saw him.
He just saw him, so it was like a vision, like he saw something, and when he heard the voice and just like when he took everything in, then he like fell over,
Yes.
and then a hand touched his head.
Yes.
So yeah, I could see it as being two different people.
Yeah.
Whereas like he's seeing something, but the person isn't like
Like he's not directly next to him or anything like that.
yeah.
That's what leads me to think that, like, because he's seeing the guy over there, and again, we don't know how long he's been asleep, so like that, but it seems to suggest to me this ain't another person talking to him. In which case, I'm almost inclined to think he doesn't say it outright, but the person who talks going forward reminds me of Gabriel from the previous chapters, to where Gabriel is like the messenger angel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it's the same person, but
Similar, yeah.
it seems like that. So he said to me, Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words I'm about to speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. So for some reason, he's like, Daniel, you need to get up and stand upright. Like, get up off your feet, or get up off your hands and stand upright. Why? I don't know. It's almost like he's saying, like, gird yourself and be a man. Like, don't be on your belly, don't be on your hands, stand upright, stand at attention.
Yeah,
Hey,
it's like
I'm
in a high
not
esteem. So it's like
Yeah.
it's like he's saying like your royalty, act like it.
Yeah.
He's like, no, it kind of reminds me of the from what is it, Full Metal Jacket, where it's like on your feet.
Yeah. And when he really does, he's kind of speaking like a drill sergeant a little bit.
Yeah.
And when he spoke this word to me, I stood up trembling, which is funny because he's like, stand upright. He's like, I'm trying, sir. But he's still terrified.
Yeah.
Then he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel. And Daniel's like, easy for you to say. Did you see what I just saw?
Yeah, that would also imply an angel, because they're famous for saying that very phrase.
Yeah. So he said to me, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you gave your heart to understand this and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. To me, this just raises more questions.
What is this?
What is this, right? Yeah, he says, from the first day that you gave your heart to understand this. And it seems like the this he's speaking of would be a reference to whatever the catalyst was that made Daniel start mourning 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah, maybe the word mentioned in the first or second verse.
In the second. I've been mourning for 3 weeks, I did not eat.
The word was revealed to Daniel. And the word was true and one of great conflict, but he understood the word and had an understanding of what happened.
Oh. So it could be, well... I wonder if it's saying...
Or are you saying that's maybe like a summary of what's gonna be the talk? Like, is it referring to like what they're gonna talk about, like what we're talking about, or?
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out, like... see, I just get more confused by this. Because it says... let's see. From the first day you gave your heart to understand this and humble yourself before God.
So
Like, this would make a lot more sense to me if verses 4 through 9 took place on the first day, and then he spends 21 days mourning over it. But I don't think that's what's being implied here. You know what I mean? To where it's like, because it specifically says that he heard the sound of his words, right? And so if it was like he heard the sound of the words, and he's wrestling over this in mourning for 21 days, and then this guy shows up and says, I'm here to explain it. But that's not what it seems to be suggesting.
Wait, so you're saying that it's not suggesting that he hears this word and then basically the beginning of the 3 weeks he hears him and then it takes that 3 weeks of the morning before he gets there?
No, that probably is what's happening, to where something was revealed to Daniel that it happened off screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where we don't know exactly what happened. Something was revealed to him, and I guess that is what put him in a state of mourning. In which case, it could be that maybe the content of chapter 11 is the explanation for that. I don't know.
Yeah. It says he humbled himself before God, so it's maybe he's referring to that mourning period where he's literally humbling himself to the ground.
Yeah. But either way, there's an interesting implication here, because it says, don't be afraid, for from the first day that you gave your heart to understand this and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. So Daniel's been fasting for 3 weeks, and this angel messenger figure says that I started coming here on the very first day you started praying.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen something like this happen before, Daniel?
Not like the very previous chapter.
Yeah, in the previous chapter, remember, Daniel starts praying, and at the very end of it, Gabriel says, hey, I was sent the moment you started praying. And then the question became, well, why did it take so long? But at least in that instance, he showed up on the same day, right? It just was a little bit later. What's the difference here? How long's passed?
3 weeks.
3 weeks! Mm-hmm. And it's well, dang, was there traffic in the spiritual realm? What took you 3 weeks to get here? And what's crazy is that the angel is actually going to give an explanation. He says, yeah, I was sent here on the first day, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia was standing against me for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. Now, I had been left there with the kings of Persia. So he says, there is a reason it took me 21 days. And what is the reason?
So apparently having the kings of Persia were holding him back, or
I don't think.
it's what
Well, this is
which
an
kind of
angel.
weird.
Well,
I guess it would be an angel thing, so maybe there's some evil Elohim that was appointed over the people that are now called, in this time frame, called Persia, but maybe back then were called something different, right? Maybe that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, assuming that.
So remember when God
You're saying
back in Genesis, whenever God put smaller Elohim over the people, and then you had the whole thing with the Nephilim.
Yeah.
I'm saying maybe this is a similar figure to that.
Yeah. You're referring to the Elohim that God set over the land of Persia. So that's the prince.
Yes, that's what. But I think that might be a bit of a stretch.
No, that's what I think is going on here. Because remember, we saw this earlier in Daniel. Remember, there was the Watcher figure who showed up, and he was the Watcher who was over Babylon.
Yeah.
That's at least what it led us to believe. Yeah, it does seem that just seems to be the worldview of the Bible, to where God has appointed. This is what the New Testament calls the principalities of the air, right? It's literally yes, there are earthly kings, but God has also appointed spiritual beings over the nations as well. And some people would say that that dominion ended with the ascension of Christ, to where, but I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to interpret all
And
that
then
stuff.
a lot of people would push back on this, and this is me playing devil's advocate here. There's a lot of people who push back on this and be like, well, if God has dominion over everything, then why did this sort of thing happen with this delay?
Which is a great question, which we're not getting an answer to. It seems honestly, this verse raises more questions than it gives answers, because it's simply we don't get insight like this to the spiritual realm pretty much anywhere else in the Bible. That's why I'm telling you, this chapter is just a weird chapter. We're simply told what is going on, and it very clearly seems to be describing not when it says the prince of the kingdom of Persia, it is not talking about Cyrus. It is talking about somebody else who is unnamed, but who seems to be a spiritual being. And this messenger, angel figure, who is also very clearly sent from the heavenly realm, he says, I was on my way, but I got held up for 21 days because I was opposed by this Prince of Persia figure. And we're like, what's going on there? No idea. But this is what the Bible, whenever the New Testament talks about spiritual warfare, this is what it has in mind. Remember that story with Elijah? It was Elisha, right? Not Elijah. Remember whenever he sees the armies of God, like
Yeah, that Elisha.
Yes.
yeah, to where basically the idea is that even right now, as we're talking, there is an entire spiritual world that we are just totally blind to,
Yeah.
and that we don't see. And in many ways, we are like the men who were with Daniel, right? Daniel, he sees this vision of a person, and he's like, "Oh, this is terrifying." And everybody else, they feel the effect of that person, but they don't see him. Whereas Daniel, he continues to receive further insight to where this messenger shows up and he says, "Hey, dude, sorry I'm running 3 weeks late. Hit a traffic jam." And the traffic jam was a 3-week-long battle with another principality to where he literally, apparently this guy was too strong for him. And what's interesting there is, okay, what is the messenger being sent to do for Daniel?
He's being sent to give him a vision about the downfall of Persia, which I would assume this quote-unquote spiritual princely figure of Persia does not want to happen.
Well, yeah, so he is being sent to communicate something to Daniel, and the only it seems like this Prince of Persia figure doesn't want that message being shared, and so he steps in the way. And that actually makes sense because when we get to chapter 11, well, if you look at the content of the message, it's going to be communicating that Persia is going to fall. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense why the principality figure is like, nope, he steps in there. And so the idea is that it's just so fascinating, right? I don't know what to do with this, but it's like, it lets us know that there is, the spiritual realm isn't just all sunshine and dandelions all the time. There are Elohim who are on God's side. There are Elohim who are against God. And they are in conflict with one another, and they have to fight in order to what we think about how it's a battle for us sometimes to walk in obedience to God. Apparently, for the angelic figures, it is too, to where God dispatched this guy to go deliver Daniel a message, and it took him 21 days to get this message there because of all the stuff that was going down in the spiritual realm. And it also suggests that this angelic figure is not all powerful. And for some reason, God has allowed them to, he has allowed the evil forces to be of equal power with them for a time. Mm. It just reminds us that there's so much we don't know about the supernatural realm, just because the Bible isn't concerned with telling us that. The Bible tells us the story of earth, right? And it tells us about God's commitment to dwell with man again. And it only tells us what we need to know. But right here, we get insight to this realm that's just beyond us. And apparently a lot's going on that we just don't even know of. And I think that there's probably some encouragement here, because we think about it.
Is that we're not the only, okay, sorry to interrupt, but it's here, I guess the kind of hint I'm getting at, right, is that we're angels are being tested too. We're not the only ones being tested.
That's not necessarily what I was going for. Mainly just because it doesn't seem like this guy was being tested in the sense of doing right or wrong, right? It seems like the guy who's delivering the message to Daniel, he's not being tempted or anything. He's literally just going to battle and facing off with this guy that he's having to fight. The thing I was going to say, which might be encouraging, is that all because Daniel didn't receive an answer to his prayer immediately didn't mean that God hadn't been listening, mm-hmm. right? This guy says, "Oh no, God sent me to deliver this message the first day. It's just taken me 3 weeks to get here."
Yeah.
And so that kind of should just let us know that, first off, prayer does affect things. Whenever we pray, God hears it, and He will do things in response to it. And there might be times where God does give a certain answer to prayer, and He might be setting in motion something that will make that answer evident to us, but it might not come immediately. If we're praying about something, God might have an answer for us, but there might be certain spiritual things that get in the way of us getting that answer anytime soon. And so, I don't know, it just reassures us that there's more going on in the world than we, and beyond the world, that we regularly think of, which is interesting to consider. And if that weren't weird enough, this guy, so apparently the Prince of Persia figure, this other spiritual being, he is a good match for the figure that is delivering the message to Daniel. But then the guy explains that this Prince of Persia figure is no match for Michael. It says, then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. And the question becomes, who the heck is Michael?
And why did he wait this long?
Yeah. Michael apparently shows up, and he has no problem taking care of this. It says, now I have been left there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the last days, for the vision pertains to the days of the future. Right? And so this was the message that the Prince of Persia did not want getting to Daniel. He did not want Daniel getting this message, but now that Michael has taken care of the Prince of Persia guy and taken him away, it seems like Michael paved the way for the dude to get through to Daniel and deliver this message.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. What do y'all make of that?
It was a very intense battle, and they needed some backup.
Yeah.
Also, probably implies Michael is a very powerful person because he seemed to be able to handle that a lot swifter
Yeah,
than the first guy that was sent.
Yeah, it presents Michael as being very powerful, because this Prince of Persia, like it makes sense why he calls him one of the chief princes, right? Because apparently, if you're looking at like the hierarchy of the spiritual realm,
Mm-hmm.
the Prince of Persia is on equal level with whoever is delivering this message to Daniel, to where they were evenly matched. Whereas Michael shows up and he just sweeps the guy out of the way, and he just kind of carries him off, to where they're presumably just going and taking care of the battle elsewhere. And that leaves... I'm trying to make sense of the phrase, now I have been left there with the kings of Persia.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that is referring to the angel himself being left just with like the actual kings of Persia, like, and they're no threat to him because they're just normal kings, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
Sounds like they were stationed to oversee a certain area that has these people in it.
I think that's what it's leaning towards, is that like the actual physical kings, which the kings of Persia obviously have minimal or I would assume don't interact with the spiritual realm all that much, so they probably don't have much of an impact as to what he's attempting to do. So we can just walk past them and not bother them.
Yeah, I think the suggestion is just that once the prince of the king of Persia, or the prince of the kingdom of Persia, once he was out of the way, the human kings were no threat to him, right? So again, it seems to me that it's painting the picture of a hierarchy, to where the greatest of human kings is not as great as this angelic figure who's showing up to Daniel, right? However, the Prince of Persia is on equal terms with them, but neither of them are on equal terms with Michael, right? Who was like a chief of the prince. Like, so there's princes on earth, there's kings on earth, there are the princes of heaven, and then there's the chief prince, right? That's Michael. I'm assuming that's kind of like the hierarchy that's being established here.
Because heaven can only have one king.
Yeah. And then that arrives at him just saying, the reason I'm here is because I'm here to declare a message to you. I am going to tell you what is going to happen to your people. So what people? What is your people?
The Jews.
The Jewish people, right? I'm going to tell you what's happening to the Jewish people in the last days. For the vision pertains to the days yet to the future. So he says, I'm here to tell you something that's going to happen to the Jewish people in the future. And for some reason, the Prince of Persia did not want you to know this, but Michael did want you to know this. That's why he took care of the problem. And so it says, now when he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and became speechless. Which is really funny because so far Daniel has yet to say anything.
And
So
he just keeps collapsing.
yeah, he's already been speechless, but now he's going to the ground again, which is just funny. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Like, man, I wouldn't be able to handle it any better than he did here.
Yeah,
Having a situation like
yeah,
that.
same. And the phrase for last days there, I think this is the same phrase we've seen before in Daniel. Let me just check. Yeah, this is the Acharit. Oh no! So this is we haven't seen this one yet in Daniel. So this is the phrase. No, we did actually. Is in Daniel chapter 8. In regard, one said, "Behold, I am going to let you know what will happen in the final period." So Daniel chapter 8 was the vision of like the ram and the goat, and that it showed up twice there. But this phrase in particular is the phrase that shows up in Genesis chapter 49, whenever Jacob says that he's going to say what's going to befall Israel in the last days. And then it shows up again in Deuteronomy chapter 32, Deuteronomy 31 and 32, whenever Moses says he's going to say what befalls Israel in the last days. And this phrase does, in particular, seem to be associated not simply with the near future, but the end of all time. And so that would suggest to us that the prophecy that Daniel's about to receive is not simply dealing with near future stuff, but the culmination of all things, right? And so we kind of have to interpret it in both lights, if that makes sense. So when he spoke these things, according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground, became speechless. Question for y'all real quick. Why on earth would, why does it seem necessary for this angel figure to explain this stuff to Daniel? Is he simply explaining the delay?
Could be that's probably part of it, but I feel like he wants Daniel to understand that there are other, that there's that there are maybe other spiritual matters that he has to deal with as well.
Yeah.
That's the best I got.
I don't have a firm answer here. I've got like a theory, but I think it's probably a bit of a stretch. But like my whole question, like the reason I want to keep asking this is like, we don't want to simply figure out what's being said. We want to figure out why. Like why is it necessary for Daniel to know all this information? And why is it being brought up? What other theories do y'all have?
Maybe since it's with importance to the future, and it's going to be about the fall of Persia, as we will see in chapter 11. He's maybe explaining that, look, the spiritual, or the spiritual, essentially, spiritual being that's in charge of Persia does not want this getting out.
Yeah. Part of me is wondering, and again, this might be a stretch, but this is where it's going to kind of lead to where I'm going to bring us at the very end of this discussion today. It seems to me almost like the thing, like if I'm trying to figure out why he has to communicate all this stuff, one answer that would resolve the tension to me is if the person speaking here is a separate person and he's explaining what Daniel just saw, right?
Yeah.
In which case, what if, and again, this is a big what if the person that Daniel just saw was Michael? And Daniel's like, oh, what the heck was that? And he falls over and he passes out. A guy wakes him up and explains, that's the dude who helped me get here. Right? To where it's like, it's almost like Daniel just saw, and we were even talking about how he looked fierce and he looks like he's on fire and stuff, to where he looks like a person almost like in the middle of a battle. And then Daniel wakes up and this person explains to him and says, sorry for the delay. I got caught up in stuff. Michael helped me out. And it to me, that could almost resolve things to where you're like, who the heck is Michael? And the name Michael means who is like God, right? And so if you're just like, Daniel's like, what the heck did I just see? And then this guy just shows up and says, like to me, this would make sense that he gives all this detail if he's explaining to Daniel what he literally just saw moments before. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That could be a stretch to where I could just be reading into it. And it also is still possible that the person speaking to Daniel is the person who Daniel saw in the previous verses, right? So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of ambiguity here that we just can't say dogmatically. I'm just trying to kind of piece it all together. And I really don't know what to do with it. I've listened to so many sermons about this chapter leading into this week just to try to make sense of it. And every single sermon I listen to has a different interpretation. And so it's really frustrating. I just want one solid answer.
You know what? I'll quit trying to figure
Yeah.
this
It's
out.
like when you try to read academic literature, I can't
Yeah.
get one consistency over
Yeah.
over composition of
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, there was
And
stuff
the
I
front.
used-
Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, there was some stuff I used to study years ago, like to Bible and like criticisms of it and stuff like that, and then it got to the point where it was so technical, like people kept like coming up with other objections and stuff like, you know what, this is too much. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
leave it.
Well, and the thing is, I'm all about shit like that's why I try to listen to different stuff. My frustration is that every sermon I listened to, people were so confident that they had it right. Whereas to me, I would much rather give you different interpretations and just like us wrestle through it together rather than saying overconfidently that I know exactly what's going on. Because to me, I would rather you have different interpretations and now you've got stuff you can wrestle through for years to come.
Yeah.
Whereas every single sermon I listen to, the people are like, I know exactly what's going on here. But then every person disagreed with the other person. And I'm like,
You
it
can't
seems
all-
that doesn't seem to make sense.
you can't all be correct if you're all disagreeing.
Exactly. And so, to me, I would rather give us different interpretations, and one of them is probably correct. And so we're just trying to wrestle through it together. And so either the guy talking to Daniel is the person he saw, or it's a separate person and he's explaining to Daniel what he just saw. That second thing makes more sense to me. But then it gets even more complicated when you go to verse 16. And behold, one in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. Which is also weird, because whenever we finish verse 15, what position was Daniel in?
Fish on the ground again.
His face is on the ground again, and he's speechless. But now somebody's fingers are on his lips, which would seem to imply that sometime in between verses 15 and 16, he got back up.
Yeah.
Right?
It says he turned his face to the ground. Could he not just be like looking down?
Yeah.
Oh, that could make sense. Yeah. But even then, I would say he probably had to lift his face at some point, or else there's like just he looks down. There's just a person like putting a finger up.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
I was up here.
Yeah, but like again, there's just weird things to me because it's yeah. So I guess he didn't necessarily his face isn't on the ground, but he looks down and he speaks. It's like maybe he's almost lost in thought, right?
Now the sensory overload.
Yeah.
It's like, Lord, please end this.
Yeah. And behold, one in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. When you hear that phrase, what do you think of?
Chapter 7.
You think of chapter 7 when he says, "Behold, one like a son of man was riding on the clouds." But it's a slightly different phrase,
Yeah.
right?
Also, similar to whenever they were in the furnace and someone said, one who looks like son of the gods is in there.
Mhm.
Like, we've heard that phrase repeated throughout this whole book.
Yes. And the word here, so this is one place where the translation is probably a little bit too close in English, where it makes us think that it's more similar to chapter 7 than it is. Because in chapter 7 it says, "One like a son of man riding on the clouds," whereas the phrase here, let me just double check this to make sure, yeah. The word here is the word demut, which means likeness or similitude, and it's the phrase that, like, it doesn't show up in Daniel 7, right? So in Daniel 7, I'm pretty sure it's like it could be translated like one as the son of man. Whereas likeness here is a separate word in Hebrew, and it's the word that we see in Genesis chapter 1 when God says, "Let us make a man in our image according to our likeness." Right? So it's that same word. And then like chapter 5 when it says, "In the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God."
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam had a son in his own likeness. Right? And so I think that would lead us to believe that this probably is not the same person from Daniel chapter 7, because if it was, it would probably be described the same way.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
And so now you've got one in the likeness of a sons of men, to where this dude, he just looks like a normal guy.
Could also be an angel, because a lot of times they use man and angel interchangeably in front of the same
Yeah.
person.
But and so that's again where it just gets more and more confusing to me, because it seems like it's described like whenever he said one like a son of man, he was describing a person who looked like a human, but he was doing divine things. Whereas this person also seems to be somebody who, I mean, being born in the likeness of the sons of men, he just looks like a just straight up human. So this very clearly, verse 16, seems to be a different person than the previous, like at the very least, than the person he first saw.
Yeah.
The question becomes, is this the same person as the person he was just talking to? And I would say probably not, because he probably would have described the guy like that earlier, unless he just never even looked at the person. I don't know. Like, there's just so many confusing things to me here. I'm assuming we're dealing with 3 separate people, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
One in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips, and then I opened my mouth, and I spoke, and I said to him who was standing before me, "O my Lord, as a result of the vision that appeared, pains have come upon me, and I have retained no might." So he's talking to this guy, who I would assume is an angel of some sort, but he looks like just a regular guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Daniel finally speaks, but first the guy touches his lips, what's the deal with that?
All it makes me think of is Isaiah 6,
Yeah.
where he's like in the presence of God and he says he's an unclean, or I forget the exact word. He basically says like, "I'm an unclean man. I don't belong here."
Yeah.
And the angel grabs a coal and touches his lips, and doesn't he say your sins are forgiven?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, so I don't know if there's like something similar going on where it's like he's, I'm not sure.
Well, it seems like it. Like, it seems like, at the very least, what we can say, and I've seen other people make this connection, Daniel chapter 10 almost feels like a commission. Like it reminds us of Isaiah chapter 6. Like, that whole story in Isaiah 6 is when Isaiah was first commissioned to be a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
But the weird thing is that happens at the beginning of Isaiah's ministry. And a similar experience is going to happen with Ezekiel at the beginning of his ministry in Ezekiel chapter 1. Whereas here, we've got Daniel at the very end of his ministry, and it seems like the touching of the lips, it seems like that's communicating, you can open your mouth and you're going to communicate this message to other people, right? It's like this is what he's going to be using to communicate the message, I'm assuming. So it definitely brings to mind Isaiah, but I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't know. But it does bring to mind, like with John in Revelation, whenever he sees the figure that looks like the guy that we talked about at the beginning of this chapter, that figure tells him, write a book and send it out. And so John is told, go write a book. It seems like maybe this is communicating to Daniel, you're going to go tell people what you've seen. And so Daniel speaks, and he says, "My Lord, as a result of the vision that appeared, pains have come upon me. I have retained no might." So he's like, dude, I'm freaked out. And are y'all agreeing with me that like the vision he's talking about here is what he saw at the very beginning?
I would assume so.
Like the man by the tigers? Okay. So he says, "I have no might. How can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord?" So he's like, dude, I can't even talk to you. Or maybe, I guess maybe that's why the guy touched his mouth. Because like he's being like, talk. Because verse 15 emphasized his speechlessness. Like, he had nothing to say. And now this guy touches his lips and he's being like, "Are you mute or something?" And he says,
I was just thinking.
yeah, he's like, "I don't even know what to say. I don't have any strength. How can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? As for me, right now no might stands within me, nor does any breath remain within me." So he's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I've got no strength. I'm freaked out. I'm very confused. And so it's good to know that at least Daniel's also confused. But the encouraging thing is that at the beginning of the chapter, we were told that he had understanding. And so presumably by the end of all of this, we will too. Then this one, with the appearance of a man, touched me again and strengthened me. So what happens there?
He's touched again and he's given the strength to stand up, essentially.
Yes. And I love this verse because he at least clarifies what person we're dealing with. This is the same person from the previous paragraph, you know?
Yeah.
At the very least, we know that this is the same person. And so Daniel says, "I've got no strength, I'm confused, I'm freaked out." And also keep in mind, he's been fasting for 3 weeks, and so he's already in a state of weakness, and then he's going through all of this stuff, and he's just at his wit's end. And so this guy touches him, and he's immediately strengthened, which suggests that even though this guy looks like a man, what does it say about him?
When he touched him, he was strengthened again.
Yeah, but what does it say about the guy? Sean, what did you say?
Well, it definitely implies some kind of not human attributes.
Yeah, he's not just he's not a regular guy, that's for sure. Like, I can't just touch a person and give them strength. And so this would suggest that, again, it is some angelic, divine messenger figure.
Yeah,
But
and
he looks like a human.
Yeah, and if it was just a person, he could have just said that and not say, "Hey, this looks like a person." Like, well, yeah, I would imagine a man would look like a man.
Yeah. And so he strengthened him. And this again would lead me to believe that the person he's talking to now is a different person than the previous person he was talking to, right? Because the previous person, it didn't seem like Daniel didn't seem to be as fearful of the second person as he was of this guy, right? It seems like the first version, like the person he saw in the opening vision, right? He's terrified of that guy. And then the second person shows up, and the guy's just explaining, hey, I'm here to send you a message to deliver something to you. Sorry for the delay. And then this third guy shows up, and Daniel's terrified again. He's like, I don't even know how to speak to you.
Yeah.
Which, again, would suggest 3 people. Were you saying something, Sean?
Well, I was just gonna say the next verse almost makes it sound like he's the same guy that the second guy, because he says he's gonna go return to fight against the Prince of Persia.
Yeah. No.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that could just be a language thing where it's
Yeah.
like he's not necessarily. I guess he doesn't have to necessarily imply that he's the same guy.
It makes no sense to me that it's just 2 people throughout.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm saying all of it confuses me.
Yeah.
Because to me, the language so far leads me to think it's 3. But if you keep reading, I agree. It's like, this is what I've been wrestling through for the last week. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Because, like, all of this would be resolved for me if we go back to the previous paragraph and verse 10, if it said, then behold, a hand touched me and set me shaking on my hands and knees, and one with the appearance of a son of man said to me. You know what I mean? If it said that, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Because then he'd be described that way every time he talks.
Yeah.
But instead, you have this guy talking for a while, and then it says, oh, behold, one in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. But one way you might be able to get away from this is that if you're just following where Daniel's at right now. In verse 10, he starts off face on the ground, he gets up on his hands and knees, and then he stands up, and the guy tells him to stand straight up, but technically Daniel says, when he had spoken to me, I turned my face toward the ground. And so it could be that in verses 10 through 15, he has not yet looked up to the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so maybe thus far he's just hearing, and then verse 16 he finally looks up. One in the likeness of the sons of men was touching my lips. Does that make sense? If we're trying to make this the same person.
He doesn't describe the appearance until he actually sees him.
Yes. Yeah. And so again, we're just trying to make sense of it, and so it could be 3 people, could be 2. So I don't know. So he said, "Oh man of high esteem." So he calls Daniel the same thing that the guy said in verse 11, right? "Oh Daniel, man of high esteem." And then he says, "Do not be afraid," which is the same thing that the guy said in verse 12. And so at the very least, he's delivering the same message as the previous guy. If I'm getting too obsessed with this, I apologize. I just
it's for a reason.
it's just like it confuses me to where I'm just like I want to understand, and like just tracking with it. It's like, is this 1 person, 2 people, 3 people? And I think most people that I've looked at, they interpret the person talking in verses 10 through 15 to be the same as the person Daniel saw at the beginning of the vision. And then they interpret verses 16 and onwards as being a second person. Whereas to me, I would say, if there's only 2 people involved here, the person in verses 10 through 15 is the same as verses 16 and onwards.
Yeah.
Right? To where it seems very clear to me that no matter what, the person talking right now is a different person than the person who showed up at the very beginning.
No, because
Yeah.
it seems like to me. It seems like to me like they're all just coming to Daniel in a hurry. Like they just beat off this prince figure.
Yeah.
And Michael comes in and kind of rushes in and beats this other guy there, and then Daniel's like, "Holy bleep," and just freaks out. And then the other guy shows up and it's like, "It's okay, you can."
Yeah, like to me it seems like we're dealing with at most 3 people, or angels, but probably 2, and the first one does not speak at all, right? And then it could be a second one or maybe 2 others who talk throughout the rest of it. But like the language is like it's just confusing to me, and I'm probably overthinking it, but it's driving me nuts. And he said, "O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Gather strength and be strong." It's like he's like, Daniel, bro, get your act together. Man of high esteem, it's just funny. Don't be afraid. Peace be with you. Gather strength. Be strong. Like Daniel must be going through it. Like this guy's looking at Daniel. He's like, dude, you need to get your act
And
together.
it also seems like he's in a bit of a hurry as well, because like I got to get back and take care of this prince guy.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, he's going to say that. So now, as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength. So now, the guy doesn't even have to touch him, right? The guy touches him, Daniel receives strength. And then he says to Daniel, be strengthened, and he receives strength. And I guess you could argue that potentially maybe it's like a Braveheart situation where he's just so motivated by the guy's battle speech or something. But it seems like it's miraculous being strengthened.
Yeah.
I received strength, and I said, may my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Then he said, do you know why I came to you? Well, and assuming this is the same person as the previous passage, the answer should be yes, because he already said it, right? I am here to deliver a message of the end days to you. But I shall now return to fight against the Prince of Persia, which again would lead you to think it's the same person as the previous passage. But then you just have to ask, why did Daniel wait so long to describe him? I'm assuming it's literally just Daniel's getting up and he's keeping his eyes focused downwards, probably because he's afraid. Like, that actually could make sense. Maybe he's afraid to look up because he's afraid he's going to see what he saw before. But instead, when he finally looks up, he's like, oh, this guy just looks like a regular guy. That could make more sense, I guess, to me.
Mm.
So he said, do you know why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the Prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the Prince of Greece is about to come. Oh, no. So, what's the deal there?
He's like, I gotta help make way for the Prince of Greece to come.
Yeah. Well, and I think the idea is that the Prince of Greece is also going to be putting up a fight as well.
Yeah.
And it also, again, it lets you know that there is so much more going on than what is seen to the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
This actually could make sense of the whole, I was talking about like Daniel being like a crawling thing, then a beast, and then a man. Whenever we looked at the earlier visions, what were the human kings being compared to?
Animals.
They were being compared to animals, right? Whereas, as we're looking at these angelic figures throughout the story, they're consistently being presented like men, right? And so, if Daniel is in the position of a beast, but he's being told to stand up like a man, it's almost like he is being invited to stop looking at the world from an earthly perspective and start looking at it from a divine perspective, right? Like, if the kings of earth are beasts, and the kingdoms of earth are beasts, but, we saw the one like a son of man riding on the clouds, and then we see this angel figure who looks like a man, he's got a golden sash, and then you've got this guy who looks like a son of man. The angels are consistently men, right? And so Daniel's being told, stand up like a man. It's like he's being invited to see human history. Like, he's already seen it from the human perspective, right? He's seen the beasts and stuff. Now he's being invited to see it from God's perspective, I guess.
Yeah, like physically speaking, like standing up tall, it's like he's seeing from a higher perspective.
Yeah. So I can kind of see if that's what's going on here. So then he said, do you know why I came to you? But I shall return to fight against the Prince of Persia. I'm going to go forth. Behold, the Prince of Greece is about to come. So the Prince of Persia was already putting on a fight. And based off what we know from previous chapters, is Greece going to be stronger or weaker than Persia? Stronger, right? Persia was the ram. Greece is the goat. Greatest of all time. And so if the Prince of Persia put up a good fight, you know that the Prince of Greece is going to put up a good fight as well. And so he's like, I need to go back because there's going to be stuff going on that needs to be handled. Which again, just so much going on in the spiritual realm we just don't know about. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Now there is no one who exerts strength with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Okay, so first off, before he goes to fight against the Prince of Persia again, what does he say he's going to do?
Explain.
He's going to explain something true to Daniel. And that's going to be the content of what we see in chapters 11 and 12. Right? So that's what we're going to pick up with next week. But then he goes and clarifies something. There is no one who exerts strength with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. So what do we learn about Michael here, and what do we learn about what's going on?
He's the Prince of Israel.
Yeah, Michael is the Prince of Israel. Which is really strange, because how have we been interpreting these princes so far?
Spiritual.
Like the Elohim who are appointed over the nations, right? And again, the text doesn't necessarily say that exact language, but that seems to be what's implied, because we know for a fact they're not just humans.
Yeah.
They're, at the very least, angelic forces, and so we're just kind of trying to figure out, from what we do know from previous books of the Bible, what is the equivalent, and it would be like Deuteronomy 32, whenever God dispersed the nations, He appointed them according to the sons of the gods,
Yeah.
right? And so that makes it interesting because in Deuteronomy 32, what does it say about Israel? Like whenever God dispersed things and he appointed the nations like according to the sons of God, what does it say about Yahweh?
Yahweh's portion is Israel.
Yahweh's portion is Israel, which would imply
He's
That-
the prince.
it would imply that Yahweh is the Prince of Israel.
Yeah, and he is also referred to as like the Prince of Peace and stuff too.
Yeah, which is interesting. But then it says, "No one else exerting strength with me against these forces except Michael, your prince." It's like, except for who is God, who is like God, your prince. It's like, this is just it's a weird detail to me because it
Yeah.
seems like at this point Michael is being put in the place that is typically associated with God,
Yeah.
which raises questions to me that I want to address in a second. But then also, it makes you wonder, who is this guy that we're dealing with here? And we don't know. It is possible, I guess, that the person talking to him is Gabriel, since in previous chapters, Gabriel seems to be the messenger angel who Daniel's been interacting with, but he doesn't call him that name here. And so it would lead me to think that it's another person who's just left unnamed. I don't know, but apparently him and Michael are the only ones who are fighting against these princes. And I don't know what the implications of that would be either.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But the reason, so what I wanted to get to talk about just here at the end here, it's something that I talked to Sean about earlier today. It's something I've been wrestling through because there are some people who have taken this in a very dangerous direction.
Mhm.
But the more I've been studying scripture, specifically in the book of Daniel, and also stuff in the New Testament, I've noticed again and again that the way that Michael seems to be described seems to be in a way that is putting him in the place of God. And whenever we talk about Michael, he's the only person in scripture who is described with the term archangel, right? And the reason why this makes me nervous is because there are some people who do claim that Jesus is Michael the Archangel. And do you know who is most popular for believing that?
The Mormons?
Not Mormons. Close.
Jehovah's Witnesses?
Jehovah's Witness. And so that's why I started getting really nervous because I'm like, wait a second. Like the more I've been studying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it seems like the text is like making me believe that Michael is Jesus, and I'm like, oh no. But I this made me look into it, right? Because the thing is, I don't want to start a cult. I never want to do that.
Right.
But I also do want to follow scripture wherever it leads. And so I started looking into this, and it turns out that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the only ones who believe this. There have actually been many God-fearing, like, sound theology people who have believed it as well, but there's a careful distinction to make, right? There have been other people, such as Charles Spurgeon and Matthew Henry, and I believe even John Calvin, like, hinted that he might believe it. I think, like, the church historian Hippolytus, like, I looked it up. There are a bunch of historically, like, highly revered pastors and teachers and scholars who have held that Jesus is Michael. The distinction is that with Jehovah's Witnesses, they argue that Jesus is Michael in the sense of Jesus is lower than God, and therefore he is a created being, right? Whereas these other people, they're not arguing that Jesus is lesser, they're arguing that Michael is greater than we typically think, right? So they're arguing that Michael is, like, what we already believe about Jesus, they're arguing that that's who Michael actually, Michael is Jesus, not Jesus is Michael, if that makes sense,
yeah,
right?
I was gonna say.
Like, whenever we think of Michael, typically, we think of the highest of all angels, but we usually think of him as a created being by God. And if that's what you're arguing Jesus is, that would be heretical, and that would be starting a cult. And so that's why we would reject the Jehovah's Witness position. However, there have been many genuine God-fearing people who do believe that Michael might just be another name for Jesus, which I think is interesting. And again, I'm not going to say that is firmly true because that is a minority position. And if you were to look it up nowadays, there's like very few people who hold to that. I mean, there is like the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which they do have some beliefs that I vastly disregard. Like I disagree with, to where they do get borderline cultish, but they are a denomination, but there are forms of them that can be very cultish. But the Seventh-day Adventist Church outright holds that Jesus is Michael. But they hold it in the sense of him, like, Jesus is still God in the flesh. Like, everything we believe about Jesus, they still affirm, right? And so their view of it would not be the heretical position. Their view of it would be more akin to Spurgeon and Matthew Henry and stuff like that. And I don't have a firm position here. This is just something that I'm wrestling through, mainly because I've arrived at it like just through studying Scripture. Because it seems to me, like just reading Daniel 10 here, it seems like the only reason Michael would be brought up is if that is who Daniel saw at the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah.
But the way that the person Daniel saw at the beginning of the chapter is described in a way that John clearly associates with Jesus later on. You know what I mean? And so, like, a lot of the information is, like, leading me towards the imagery of, like, it could be that in Revelation, John is identifying, yes, Jesus is Michael, but Michael is, you know, the Son of God, in the sense of, like, it could just be another title for Jesus in the same way that Prince of Peace or Messiah is, you know, like, if you're literally looking at the name, who is like God? Jesus is like God, right? Like, he is God in the flesh, you know?
Yeah.
And so, again, hold that with an open hand, take it with a grain of salt, because if we're wrong, we do not want to worship Michael. But it is just something that I've just genuinely been wrestling through, because, I don't know, it's been like really messing me up, because I've been like, wait a second. The text is really elevating Michael to this position, to where it seems like, I don't know, he is like the chief of all of them. And there's even stuff later on to where, just to foreshadow where we're heading in chapter 12, at the very beginning of it, first verse, it says, "Now at that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands over the sons of your people," so he is the great prince who stands over the people of Israel, "he will stand. And there will be a time of distress such as never has happened since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will wake, these to everlasting life, but the others to reproach and everlasting contempt." So it says that at the end of days, Michael, the prince of the Jewish people, will stand over everybody, and when he stands, the resurrection of all things will occur. And to me, that is exactly what Jesus is described as doing throughout the New Testament. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, again, it is entirely possible that Jesus and Michael are separate people. In which case, Jesus is the uncreated Son of God, and Michael is just like the highest of the archangels. But that is just something that I've been, I don't know, as I've been studying Scripture lately, it's been like... it's been really throwing me off, because the last thing I want to do is like fall into like a false teaching, but I do want to, no matter what, I always want to follow Scripture where it leads.
Yeah.
And so, all because something is not a majority position does not mean that it's wrong, right? I mean, in America, the majority position is the pre-tribulational rapture, and I just outright disagree with that. And so the whole goal is we want to be as biblical as possible, and yeah. So, do y'all have any thoughts on that?
I think you summed it up pretty well.
And then, real quick, Michael, I'm trying to think how many times he shows up in the New Testament. Is he mentioned in Jude?
Is that when he disputes about the body of Moses?
I believe so.
So the Lord rebuke you.
Yeah. Which, that would be the one place where, that'd actually be the best argument, I think, against Jesus being Michael. Just because it's in Jude 9, it says, "But Michael the archangel, when he, disputing with the devil, was arguing about the body of Moses, did not dare pronounce against him a blasphemous judgment, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.'" Mm-hmm. And so it seems like he's suggesting that even Michael didn't dare directly talking against Satan. Which, if Michael's Jesus, I'd be like, I mean, Satan ain't got nothing on Jesus, you know? So, to me, that verse right there would argue against them being the same. But then it could just be a nuance of exactly what he's saying there. But Michael only shows up twice in the New Testament. So he shows up 3 times in the Old Testament, and it's all in Daniel. Twice in chapter 10, once in chapter 12. Mm-hmm. And then twice in the New Testament, once in Jude, and then once in Revelation chapter 12. In Revelation chapter 12, it's talking about how there was a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels were waging war with the dragon, right? And so Michael is consistently presented as the chief messenger of God who is waging war against the devil, which is, I'd argue that's consistent with Jesus as well, right?
Yeah.
Just as long as you're defining, again, it's how you define the word angel, right? Because we believe that Jesus is the angel of Yahweh in the Old Testament, but we do not believe that he is created, right? And so it really just goes down to how exactly you define that, right? Because obviously we are not called to worship an angel, but Jesus, the messenger of the Lord, we do worship. And so, I don't know, it's just something I've been wrestling through, and I would encourage y'all to wrestle through it with me, so that if y'all come up with a compelling reason to not believe it, y'all can tell me, because I don't want to believe it unless the text leads me to. But I don't know, I find that very intriguing. So, food for thought. Anyways, y'all have any thoughts y'all want to add to this very confusing chapter? Or any thoughts on how this could possibly be applicable in our lives?
Well, I will say this. I think when it comes to just like aside from what even is going to happen throughout, I do think there is this element of, I guess maybe partially depending on what Daniel was already aware of. I would say that there is an element of this vision that God allows Daniel to see as a glimpse of like. It is a glimpse of kind of like how do I put this? As kind of as the guy hints at the end, he says that basically God's in control and God is going to, in the end, like he's going to take care of all things. And I think that there is this moment, kind of like with the Transfiguration and other events, where like God is giving Daniel this glimpse of like his full of his glory, where he's like, whenever you see this vision, you're not really thinking like, oh, the devil's gonna win against this.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is this glimpse of like, this is who's on your side. And so I think that like in that sense, there is comfort in that, because Daniel's been thinking about the future of his people. He knows that this is there is this long term, all these nations are going to be taking over, and Israel's really not going to have much rest.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be this question of like, all these different beasts that's been talked about, what's the solution to this? And so you had in chapter 7 the Son of Man that's described, but then now here you're seeing this figure that could be Michael, could be whoever, and it seems like it's almost like bam, like this is like almost like the person who's going to show up and like fix things.
Yeah.
And so I think that like it is almost like he's giving him a glimpse of the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, again, if you're interpreting this as like that guy as being the problem solver, it's really encouraging, right? It's like, oh, sweet. But, and also, on that same note, I think there is probably a comforting aspect that comes from the notion that God is so committed to communicating this information to Daniel that he was willing to send one of his messengers on a 21-day battle just to communicate it. Like, I feel like that gives you a whole new view of like scripture and what a gift it is from God. Like the fact that they're like we think about like how there are demonic influences and forces all around us trying to lead us into sin. There are also evil influences and forces and spiritual beings that are at war against God currently, trying to prevent him from accomplishing his will on earth. And he is so committed to accomplishing it that he will do whatever it takes. And in this, one could argue, well, I mean, we could still have a proper relationship with God and trust in him if we didn't have the content of Daniel chapters 10, 11, and 12. It's not like that conversation comes up every single day in my life.
Yeah.
So we could have a good relationship with him without it. Yet God is so committed in communicating to us and making his will known to us that he still was like, hey, I want you to get this message to Daniel at whatever cost. And this guy's like literally having, he's like, God sent me on a mission, and he's determined to get it to Daniel no matter what. To where literally Michael has to intervene and say, I'll hold him down for now. And like it's just like it almost feels like a heist movie or something like that. Like I don't know. I think of like Avengers Endgame whenever they're all trying to steal the gauntlet from Thanos.
Yeah.
And everybody's like fighting, like just like trading off blows because they're so desperate to get this done. It's almost like God, even though he's in control, he's so desperate to communicate how in control he is that he wants like I don't know. It's such a small message, but he's like, I want you to get this over to them just so that they can know that I've got this figured out. You know, I think that's kind of comforting.
Yeah.
But then it also raises more questions because it's like, wait, if you're in if you're in so much control, why is this battle going on?
Mm.
But at the same time, everything else he has said did pass. And so like,
Yeah.
we know that he is in control, but it just raises questions. You're like, like, I guess if anything, it heightens your understanding of his control even more because you realize the chaos that we understand in this world is just it's just the surface level chaos. And there's so many crazier things that are going on, and God's in control of all of it. And I don't know, that's fascinating to me. So,
Agreed.
anyways, there's a weird chapter, and if you want more weird chapters, come back for the next 2 weeks because the rest of Daniel's just gonna get weirder. So
Ezekiel's not gonna get much better.
yeah, all the stuff that was written in Babylon, like they were, I don't know, Babylon was a rough time. And so yeah, when we get to Ezekiel, it's gonna be pretty crazy as well. But luckily, we'll go through Ezekiel a little bit quicker, to where we don't have to wrestle through every single little thing like we're doing with Daniel here. But
Yeah.
oof. So, anyways, dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to be here. Thank you for your word. I pray that we understand it correctly, and honestly, God, I ask that you will give us greater understanding. Just as Daniel was praying for 3 weeks, and you sent your messenger to give him understanding, Lord, we pray that right here, right now, you will hear our prayer, and you will send your messenger or just send your spirit to give us greater understanding of what this text means, so that we would not misrepresent it, but so that we would understand it how you would have it be understood, knowing that you did not give your word to confuse, but to enlighten and to help us better understand your word and your ways. So we love you, Lord. We ask you for wisdom. We ask you for humility, and we ask you to guide us in truth. It's in your name we pray. Amen.